Definitional techniques. Those are the techniques to create the definitions we talked about last week. Last week we talked about the types of definitions. Remember, stipulative, lexical, and so on. Well, how are they created? That is definitional techniques. We also talked about intension and extension of terms. Hopefully you do remember and understand what it is. This is actually something you need in order to understand the definitional techniques. Intension and extension of term, intentional and extensional meaning. We can broadly divide them into two groups: techniques based on intentional meaning and techniques based on extensional meaning. Let's first start with the extensional one. Extensional or denotative definitions. Remember, extension is also what the term denotes, or denotation of that term, and it is members of the class. So based on that, the definitional techniques, which we call extensional, are the techniques based on indicating members of the class in order to understand what does the term mean. You can do it in three ways. You can point at them, that's one. You can name them individually, that's two. And you can name them in groups, that is three. This is all three ways. This is the exhaustive list. We will go through each one of them in turn, so don't worry about it. But just to give you a broader outlook, again, extensional, three types. Intentional, we will talk about later. Okay, so let's look at them. Pointing. Demonstrative or ostensive definitions. Note that both names apply. You can remember them by either one, but I would suggest that you remember both, because on the exam it may just say ostensive, and it gives you an options, answer options. Instead of demonstrative, it can say ostensive. Demonstrative is a little better though, because it's a little more clear what's going on here. A demonstration, that is exactly what it is. Pointing at objects. The most primitive, the most limited, probably something you would typically do if you're talking to somebody who does not speak your language at all, right? And you want to explain to him what something means. So you point. You just point at something. This is a couple of examples. You can point at the chair and say, chair, chair, chair. So hopefully you have more than one, right? Or you can point at Washington Monument and you can say, Washington Monument. Now, you can immediately realize that, first of all, they can be partial or complete. What does it mean? Well, when you're pointing at chairs, is this partial or complete? It is partial, because you're not pointing at all the chairs in the world. That will take you very, very long time. So you're just pointing at a certain sample. Maybe one chair, maybe two, maybe three, maybe even more than three, but nonetheless, there's limit to how many chairs you can point. How about complete? Well, Washington Monument. You point at it, you're done. There's just one Washington Monument, right? So that is a complete definition. But because many of them cannot be complete, you cannot point at all the chairs in the world, that creates a problem, because that could create a certain ambiguity. What are you talking about here? When you point at chairs and say chair, if the person doesn't speak your language, suppose all the chairs are made of wood, right? You just don't have any other chairs around. You can get an idea that when you're pointing at them and saying chair, you actually mean wood. So that is not the best way, nonetheless. Next one is enumerative. Enumerative definition, definitional technique. It assigns a meaning to the term by naming members of the class the term denotes. So you name them. Instead of pointing them, you are naming them. Again, you're doing it one by one, and for the same reason it can also be partial or complete. Let's take a look. Actress means a person such as Reese Witherspoon, Blake Lively, or Emma Stone. Baltic state means Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania. So note that in the first case you did not list all the actresses, right? You just listed three of them. But in the second case, you listed all the Baltic countries, because there's only 3 of them in existence. So Baltic state means Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. That is a complete definition. Actress, not a complete definition. For obvious reasons, there's way too many actresses to list all of them. And it also has the same problem as the previous one, because if person doesn't understand what the actress means, he or she can get an idea that you are just talking about a woman, for example, right? Reese Witherspoon, Black Lively, Emma Stone, they're all women. So maybe you are given a definition for a word woman. Not very clear. Definition by subclass. In many cases, you cannot name the individual members, or it makes no sense. In that case, you are naming subclasses. What does that mean? Let's look at them so that you could understand a little bit better. Tree means an oak, pine, elm, spruce, maple, and the like. Flower means a rose, lily, daisy, geranium, zinnia, and the like. Citation means either whale, a dolphin, or a porpoise. Fictional work means either a poem, a play, a novel, or a short story. Now, why is this subclass rather than individual? Think about it. When you say in tree means an oak, are you talking about particular oak? No, you are naming whole group of trees, which all named oaks. You even may have in mind a particular oak which grows in front of your window. Nonetheless, when you say in an oak, that covers all of them. Same thing with a rose, a lily. You're not talking about a particular rose. Why? Well, you couldn't even pick out a particular rose by naming it, because there's no rose named Daisy or whatever. Even if there is, it's not going to explain anything to anybody. So this is the important difference between enumerative and subclass. Enumerative, you name an individual actresses, for example. Reese Witherspoon is one person. There's no second actress named Reese Witherspoon. And there couldn't be, by the way, because for legal purposes, even if there is a woman in this world who is also an actress and who happened to be Reese Witherspoon, the curiosity of it is she can't be, because she'll be sued. This is a registered trademark. But nonetheless, without going into that area of legal disputes, just simple idea that some things can be named individually, other things cannot, and that's when you name things in subclasses. However, they still have the same problem. Again, some of them are partial, some of them are complete. Tree means oak, pine, elm, spruce, maple is partial. You did not name all subclasses of trees, there's more of them. Same thing with the flower. But the other two, the citation and fictional work, the book tells us they are complete. There is no more citations, for example. This is all 3 of them. So it could be partial, could be complete, but all of them have these problems. Additional problem with extensional definition. Remember, we talked about last time. Intention determines extension. Intention, or attributes, qualities we're looking for in order to identify something, are more important than extension or members. We use intention to figure out whether the term applies or not the other way around. So, of course, that is problematic. If you try to use extensional definitions, it's better to do it with intentional. And another thing is, sometimes you even can't. Remember, there are empty extensions. If you want to do extensional definition for unicorn, for example, how would you do that? Can you point at unicorns? Where are they? There's no unicorns. Can you name them? A unicorn named Joe? Not helping. So that is not a good way to go. Intentional definitions are much better. They are, again, based on intention or connotation of the term, and for this reason they are known as intentional or connotative definitions, and we will talk about 4 of them: synonymous, etymological, operational, and genus and difference. This is the 4 we will talk about. 4 strategies, 4 techniques for creating intentional definitions. Number one, synonymous. That is from the word synonym, meaning it's a different word with the same meaning. And that's basically how it works. You are looking for a different word, one word, which has exactly the same meaning. Physician means doctor. Intentional means willful. Observe means see. Note that you give one word as your definiens to describe your one word definendum. Just one. Again, you may have a problem here because many words don't have synonym. Try looking for synonym for the word wisdom, for example. What is wisdom? Knowledge, understanding, sense. Yeah, all of them are not perfect. They have kind of somewhat similar but different meaning. So can't always work. When it can work though, it's pretty good because given definition of a word with another word does of course work better than given many words whenever possible, but not always possible. Etymological definition. This is excellent type of a definition. Gives us a lot because it goes back to the ancestry of the word. Where does the word come from? That's word's etymology. Its background. How was it created? For example, the English word license is derived from the Latin verb licere, which means to be permitted. The English word captain derives from the Latin noun caput, which means head. Many English words, by the way, to go a little bit into linguistics, do in fact derive from Latin words. Not all of them, but many of them. And part of the reason is many of them come from French language. How did that happen? Well, prior to 11th century, England was mainly populated by Saxons, which is like North Germany, Scandinavia type of people. They had the language more similar to Scandinavian group of languages, different from Latin group of languages. But then in 11th century, Normans, who are people of the northern France, invaded England, took over, and in fact, since then, Normans were ruling England. The kings of England were Norman kings. And they spoke French. So it actually was kind of a language of the nobles in England from the 11th centuries on. But then it started mixing up with Saxon in a variety of ways. Saxon alphabet was also kind of different, and they started using English alphabet or Latin alphabet essentially to describe those Saxon words. And so we got this kind of weird words created, such as tough, for example. Why do we spell tough T-O-U-G-H? Crazy, isn't it? Wouldn't it be easy to spell it like T-U-F? Well, that's because they were trying to spell Saxon words using Latin letters, and they were improvising. They were coming up with all sorts of weird combination. And by the way, prior to Shakespeare's time, prior to the end of the 17th century, they did not even have a single way to do it. 16th century, if you look at 16th century English manuscripts, they spelled the words differently in sometimes exact same sentence because there was no one common way to do it. Almost anybody could do it any way they wanted. They were just trying to imitate how it sounds. And then they decided that's kind of messy, so how about we do have one rule? And so by the time of Shakespeare, they kind of started coming up with this one rule to spell everything. But unfortunately, the rule itself is a little insane. So you still, if you're a foreigner and study English language, you have to learn all this weird letter combination for many words. But that's just how it is. So anyway, this is a little bit of linguistics. Etymological definitions do give us good idea about the word. If you want to see etymological definition of almost any word today, you can Google the word and then definition after that, and what comes up is the definition, and you can see etymology right there. It always gives you etymology. It's kind of interesting. You can do it on your own time, just to out of curiosity. It helps you to understand because it gives you kind of this root meaning. What did the word mean before? And it helps you understand the word better. And it also gives you a constellation of words which are related to it. And sometimes you'd be surprised how many seemingly different words come from the same root. Operational definition. What is that? Something you would typically see in science. In fact, this is a definition which assigns a meaning to a word by specifying certain experimental procedures that determine whether or not the word applies. Procedure is a key word here. There's always some sort of a procedure. One substance is harder than another if and only if one scratches the other when the two are rubbed together. So you rub them together. If one scratches the other, then it is harder. Brain activity means that an electroencephalograph shows oscillations when attached to a patient's head. So if you want to know if somebody has brain activity, you attach the electroencephalograph, and if there are oscillations, there's brain activity still there. A potential difference exists between two conductors if and only if a voltmeter shows a reading when connected to the two conductors. A solution is an acid if and only if litmus paper turns red when dipped into it. So every time you have some sort of procedure here. Is there a problem with this type? Well, there is kind of a deficiency because it doesn't really give you the full understanding of a word, isn't it? For example, brain activity. One would hope that there is more to it than just oscillations on electroencephalograph. So that is good for some sort of, I guess, in psychology maybe, or in medicine for some strictly technical purposes, but as a linguistic definition, it's a little too limited. We want something better than that. And this is where we come to definition by genus and difference. This is the king of all definitions, goes way back, all the way to Aristotle actually. Aristotle was using this method, comes to ancient Greece, around 2400 years ago, genus and difference. What is it? It's typically used for creation of lexical definitions, the ones we see in a dictionary, and this is how it essentially works. First of all, what is a genus? A genus is a class of objects. Pretty much any class of object we can consider a genus, and the species is a proper subclass of the same genus. So something kind of smaller. Unlike in biology where it is more strict, in biology you have certain genuses and species. In logic we can call almost any two classes genus and species as long as one of them is bigger than the other and the other one is included in the first one. So for example we can say genus animal, the species would be mammal, right? Next one down. But we can also say genus mammal and then the species would be felon. Now suppose we say genus felon. What would be a species? Can you think of something? No, that's a little too specific. A cheetah? Is cheetah... I don't know. Is it a type of a felon? Maybe. I'm actually not that good in biology myself. Cat. Yeah, cat definitely would work. Because cat is a type of a felon, right? Or a tiger. That's another one. Cheetah, I don't know. Is it? Maybe. But cat and tiger are better example. Okay, well, great then. See, that requires a bit more knowledge, but so you got the picture, right? You have any kind of class, and you just find a subclass. So your bigger class would be your genus, and your subclass would be your species, and it's just relative. Anything can be your genus and your species. Okay. Then there's its particular difference between them. So let's say you're looking for a specific difference between tigers and other species in the genus Felon. What would be the difference between felons and specifically tigers? Well, attributes of being large, striped, ferocious, right, and so on. So unlike cats, for example, it is a lot more ferocious and much larger. Although some cats you don't. Anyway, so this is how you create these definitions. Or suppose you looking for definition for word sister. Your sister would be your species, and you look for genus, which is larger class. That would be a sibling, right? What is the difference between a sister and a sibling? It's a female sibling. So there you go. You pretty much created your definition, and this is exactly how it works. The definition would be sister is a female sibling. Couple other examples. If your species is Fili, you're looking for a definition for word Fili. What is Fili? It's a type of a horse. So your genus would be horse. And what's the difference? It's a young female horse. How about colt? You're looking for a definition for a word colt. Well, it is also a type of a horse, but what is the difference here? It's a young male horse. Let's try together. Let's do a definition by genus and difference for the word ice. Now we need to find a genus for it. Next class up, something relatively larger than ice. What is ice a type of? Solid? Ice a type of a solid? I don't think it's a good one here. Well, whatever is makes more sense. Yeah, of course, it doesn't have to be animal. In this case, any two classes of things. Ice is a type of an iceberg. Isn't it the other way around? Isn't the iceberg is a type of an ice? Or something more simple than that. I think you are trying a little too hard. Well, that's going way too far. Everything is a type of water. Water is much better. Everything is a type of matter, but yeah. Water is much better. Ice is a type of water. And now, okay, we found genus. What is the difference? What is the difference between ice and water? Why not all water is ice? Frozen, exactly. Ice is frozen water. There you go. We created our definition. Ice is frozen water. What is ice? Ice is frozen water. Ice means frozen water. That's how these definitions are created. That you can put it in a dictionary right now. Ice means frozen water. Note that it doesn't have to be different than genus. Could be the other way around. You can say ice means water which is frozen. That's okay too. This probably sounds a little better, but the order of genus and difference doesn't matter. However, it should have the genus, which is next class up, and it should have a difference between them. You can do it for anything. It doesn't have to be animal. You can do it for any objects. So, few examples. Stallion. What is a definition for stallion? Well, it is again type of horse, but it is a male horse. So stallion means male horse. Kitten. Kitten is a type of a cat, right? So your genus is cat. What's the difference now between a cat and a kitten? It is young cat. So kitten means young cat. Banquet. It's a type of a meal. But what kind of a meal? It's an elaborate meal. That's the difference between just any meal and a banquet. Lake. Lake is an inland body of standing water. Okay, great, but there are other types of inland body of standing water such as poodle. What's the difference now between any inland body of standing water and the lake? It is a large one. A large inland body of standing water. Okay. Now we are ready to do the first extra credit, and for that you need to construct yourself a definition by genus and difference for the following term: biologist. Okay, the first person who does that correctly, I will try not to be too difficult about it, but I am looking for you to find the genus and to find the difference. And genus should be one class up, don't go too far, and the difference of course should be the difference between them. And it should be something like a proper definition in proper English language, something you can put in a dictionary. Biologist means blah blah. And it cannot be circular. Biologist means biologist, not gonna work. Okay, biologist means scientist who studies life. Well, you did not put it as a definition though. You have to spell it out. You have to give me a definition. I'm looking for a definition. Biologist means what? Okay, well, I will accept that. Biologist is a scientist who studies life. Amazingly, this is exactly the correct answer. Okay, so scientist who studies biology, Christian, would not be good because it's circular. You cannot explain the same thing by the same thing. It's like saying chair is a chair. Well, excellent. That did not explain anything. It does have to be something other than that. And when we go through the rules, you will actually see that this is one of the rules. Cannot be circular. But we already gave extra credit for this one. We'll do it later. So another extra credit. Determine what are these techniques here. What are these definitions created? 3 definitions you have. It could be demonstrative, enumerative, subclass, synonymous, etymological, operational, or genus indifference. Figure out for all 3. I want the correct answer for all 3 of them. Okay, Megan got it. Genus indifference, yes. That top one is genus indifference. Hammer means a tool used for pounding. Think about it. Genus is a tool. The difference between hammer and a tool, it is a tool used for pounding. Unlike other tools which are used for pulling and whatever other screwing the other operations they are doing there. So that is a genus indifference. The 3 is of course operational, as most of you guys got correctly, and 5 is of course etymological. Now again, to note that Christian, I did actually say he did give the correct answers, but not in a correct order. He starts with operational, then genus indifference. And I said that if you don't have to put numbers, but they have to be in the correct order. Otherwise, I think that you got it wrong. I don't know. Order is important, right? So in this case, I cannot count it. And when I said that it's not in the correct order, I thought maybe somebody will notice that. Well, yeah, but you see, you should have listened. I actually did tell you. I said, if that's the order, that is incorrect. That was my exact words, and I thought somebody may even pick up on that, but I guess you guys didn't. Okay, I'll give it to Megan now. So this is it. Well, in this case, it was first genus indifference. 2.5. Criteria for lexical definition. This is just, again, clarification of when you're creating lexical definitions, and in particular genus indifference, what criteria you should follow. And it is kind of, I guess, self-evident, but then nonetheless we should go over it. And keep in mind that there's no homework on this. It's not an exam. But when you do create genus indifference, and we'll have another exercise in the end, you definitely should keep all of this in mind, because I will not accept definition by genus indifference if it doesn't follow at least somewhat these requirements. First of all, it should conform to the standards of proper grammar. It should be, in proper English. Convey essential meaning of the word being defined. Be neither too broad or too narrow. Avoid circularity. Not be negative when it can be affirmative. Avoid figurative, obscure, vague, or ambiguous language. Avoid affective terminology and indicate the context to which definiens pertains. Let's go over them with examples so you guys could get a better idea. So first of all, grammar. Should conform to the standards of proper grammar. Not only should it not read as if it is translated from different language using Google Translate, but it also should be proper grammar in general, such as instead of saying vacation is when you don't have to go to work or school, you should say something like vacation means a period during which activity is suspended from work or school. Instead of saying furious means if you're angry at someone, a much better way would be furious means a condition of being very angry. So you see, proper English language. That's one of the criteria. The other one, rule number 2, should convey the essential meaning of the word being defined. There's a good example from philosophy, a famous example when supposedly Plato has defined human as featherless biped. And apparently one of the philosophers made a joke out of it, took a rooster, pulled out all the feathers, and brought him and said, "There, human of Plato." Featherless biped. It's a human, right? So what's the problem here? Because it doesn't capture what is essential for being human. Something like this would be much better. Human means animal that has capacity to reason and speak. The capacity to reason and speak, not just the fact that we are featherless and bipeds. That's not good enough for being a human. Rule number 3, a lexical definition should be neither too broad nor too narrow. This is very important because when you guys give some of the attempts at defining words, giving them genus and difference definition, you often go either too broad or too narrow. For example, bird could be defined as warm-blooded animal having wings. Now that would actually be too broad, because if you think about it, then bats would fall under this definition, but bats are not birds. You can also go the other way. You can make it too narrow, such as you can define bird as any warm-blooded feathered animal that can fly. Well, that's too narrow, because that would exclude ostriches and penguins. But ostriches and penguins, even though they cannot fly, they are birds. Lexical definition should avoid circularity. That is what we were talking about before, and it is important. You cannot say science means the activity engaged in by scientists, or scientist means anyone who engages in science. It's like defining chair means chair, butter means butter. That's nothing. That's not a definition. You're repeating the same thing essentially. Lexical definition should not be negative when it can be affirmative. What does it mean? Well, for example, affirmative definition, concord means harmony. Negative definition, concourse means the absence of discord. Note that if you are defining it with the absence of something or lack of something, that is negative. However, there are exceptions. In some cases it's unavoidable, such as bold. Bold means like in hair. Well, it's very difficult to figure out a way to make it affirmative. You have to mention the fact that it is lacking something, right? Lacking hair. Lexical definition should avoid figurative, obscure, vague, or ambiguous language. Another important one, so examples of figurative language, architecture means frozen music. Camel means a sheep of the desert. Well, this is not good for lexical definitions. It is a little too poetic. Obscure language. That is something which is too difficult, defective, inappropriate, or otherwise not suitable. Something like bunny means a mammalian of the family Leporidae of the order Lagomorpha, whose young are born featherless and blind. That's like, what? Too complicated for lexical definition. How about bunny means rabbit? Much better. See? Okay. Vague. It should avoid vagueness. An example of vague definition. Democracy means a kind of government where the people are in control. On the first reading you may think, good definition, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that's pretty much covers any type of government, isn't it? People are always in control. I don't know any governments governed by aliens of outer space. It's always people. The question is, who are these people and how did they get there? Now that's what determines whether or not it is a democracy. not the fact that they are people. If all you say is people, that is also becoming way too broad, and you really have to give a better definition. You should remove this vagueness between just any people or people who are selected by the majority of the citizens and so on. Finally, ambiguous. It should not be ambiguous. Something like this. Triangle means a figure composed of 3 straight lines in which all angles are equal to 2 right angles. Why is it ambiguous? Does this mean that each angle separately is equal to 2 right angles, or that angles taken together are equal to 2 right angles? Note that it makes a lot of difference, right? And those are 2 completely different meanings, which is why it is ambiguous. You should avoid that. Lexical definition should avoid affective terminology, something like communism means that brilliant invention of Karl Marx and other foolish political visionaries in which the national wealth is supposed to be held in common by the people. Again, that would make it persuasive and not lexical. Or theism means belief in that great Santa Claus in the sky. Again, that is too affective and also violates Rule 6 because it's a metaphor. It's figurative. And finally, a lexical definition should indicate the context to which the definiens pertains. Sometimes it is important. If you say something like deuce means a tie and points towards a game, or in games towards a set, what are you talking about? You should indicate that it is tennis. So strike, it could be different things in different contexts. So you should always indicate something like strike means in baseball, a pitch at which a batter swings and misses. Strike means in bowling, the act of knocking down all the pins with the first ball of a frame. Okay, this is all the rules you should keep in mind, and with these rules in mind, create me 3 definitions by genus and difference for these 3 words: felony, widow, library. All of them should follow proper English grammar, not to be too broad, not to be too narrow, and so on. And the person who does that first, I'll try to be reasonably flexible, but you do have to get it right. Person who gets it first gets extra credit. So this is the correct answers. Felony is a very serious crime, right? Because it is a crime, but it is a serious crime. More serious than a misdemeanor, it's fine. A widow is of course a woman whose husband has died. Again, married woman, well, it's kind of like if she wasn't married she wouldn't be a widow, but okay. A library is a place with books, a room or a building. Why it's better? Some people say building. They know that the room is also good, but a place is the same as a room or a building for housing books. So in your case, just open to the public was unnecessary. But fine, let's give it to Christian because I don't want to spend all day and I don't want to be too difficult about that. So that's your second extra credit, looks like. Okay. Let's move on. We have more exercises. So this one is again identify the definitional techniques for all 3 of them. Same type of a question as we had before. Okay. Enumerative subclass etymological. That is correct. That is correct right away. Christian got it. Enumerative subclass and etymological. Yes, just note that the number 9 is not enumerative. A pie, a cake, it's not a pie named Joe, it's not a cake named Peter, right? You are naming subclasses, not individuals. Note the difference with number 9. Painting means something like Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. There is only one Mona Lisa. There is only one Starry Night by Van Gogh. That's the important difference between subclass and enumerative, whereas there's plenty of pies, there's plenty of cakes. Each one of them is subclass. So Christian gets this one too. That's the 3rd one for Christian. Good job. And the last one. Same thing again. last extra credit for this exam. Let's see who gets it. Operational, subclass, and synonymous. Okay, great job. This time you are correct. Operational, subclass, and synonymous. Jesse, where are you here? Yeah, second extra credit for you. And that concludes the extra credits for us, and that concludes the material. So we are done with everything. As usual, I will post this later on YouTube as well, without lengthy pauses and some of the pointless chatter, which not going to help you much if you rewatch it, but still trying to keep all the important stuff. Or you can watch this entire version from beginning to end on Canvas.